Hello everybody and welcome to WTS 238, the award-winning What's the Story podcast, which is available everywhere, lads. Leave us a review if you don't mind, please and thanks. God bless. My name is Danny Murray.
And I'm Graham Merrigan, and Graham Merrigan and Danny Murray are very happy with our new haircuts that we got this week. I think the both of us, the last time we got our haircut was probably around Christmas week. Mine was certainly on Christmas Eve. Danny, You look great. I look great. This has been What's the Story, and I'll talk to you again next week. Thank you. Money Logan.
You're very excitable today, man.
Danny, I love getting my haircut. I love seeing the hair come off the razor. I got a 0.5 back and sides, bit off the top, bit off the fringe. Mm-hmm. And as my dad usually says, "Oh, you were getting your haircut." Shut up.
Oh, bless him. Yeah, tell you what, the old jokes are the best jokes, aren't they, Mark Merrigan? Yeah, man, I was delighted to get in to get my haircut. I personally went for a a nice fade with a 1 around the back and sides. I've got used to a bit of length on the top of my head, so I said to my old mate, Aaron, listen, just give that a trim, tidy it up for me, make me look fresh. He said, I'd have you. And he wasn't lying. He did have me. Look at this.
He wasn't lying.
Beautiful, isn't it? I'm delighted with it.
Yeah. It's a post shower haircut where it's very fluffy on top.
It is indeed, yeah. No product in there. That's just natural hold, thanks to the God-given skills of Aaron, me best man barber in Caveman Barbers, Portlaoise. They're opening a new shop in Kilkenny as well. Shout out to the lads.
Shout out to Keith.
Yeah.
Shout out to Keith from Knight's Barber in Dundrum Town Centre. Keith is a gentleman and has been cutting my hair for about 2 years now.
That's it. Ever since the loss of Jason Brophy to the international world, we've been desperately searching for decent barbers, me and you. But yeah, look, lads, look after your barber. We never realised how much we'd missed them until they were taken away from us. So, you know, if you're fortunate enough to get in and get the old ears lowered over the next couple of days and whatnot, look after your barber. They're good folks, and it's been and that goes for all the places that are reopening. You know what I mean? It's been a struggle. So get out there and support them and help them and tell them you missed them and smile at them under your mask. Don't take your mask off. Jesus, don't do that. And and tell them how appreciative you are to have them back. But now I will be. Can't wait to see a few shops now and a few places that I've missed. But yeah, you're looking great, Graham.
Pictures. Thank you. I'm looking forward to the pictures reopening, and I'm looking forward to Palace Stadium.
Can I
I'm looking forward to being fully vaccinated.
I love the pictures as much as the net. Like, I love going to the pictures, and I love going to see something on the big screen, big blockbuster, big screen, all that kind of thing. I love getting me minstrels and putting them into me popcorn and acting like I'm 12, right?
Yeah.
I'm at a loss to understand why I'll be able to go and watch something in the pictures, but 500 people can't sit in the Aviva Stadium and watch a football match.
We still don't know when the pictures are going to be open, though.
Was there not a thing about the pictures reopening in July? When everything was...
They then went back in their words and said that.
Right. Okay. I missed that bit, so that's my own fault then for not paying attention. But I thought we'd be allowed back in the pictures. We wouldn't be allowed back in the football stadium. So it's like that makes, you know, even the RDS, the Leinster Rugby were trying to get a trial thing, and you know. But anyway, look, that's besides the point.
And we should be progressive, and we should be trialing these things.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean? We should be trialing like 400, 500 fans at Tallaght Stadium. We should be doing this at Leinster matches in the RDS. I don't see why we're not doing it. Like.
Absolutely.
I mean, the main numbers that are coming down are the hospital and ICU numbers, because nobody's getting seriously sick with the vaccination program kicking in.
Yeah.
So, I mean, instead of he's not Minister for Sport, but Minister of Sport, Jack Chambers, completely dismissing the idea of Leinster Rugby doing something in the RDS. It's just like, don't be dismissing it straight away. Give it a chance. Give it a shot. I mean, we seen it 2 weeks ago in Liverpool where they had a full-blown rave with 5,000 people. And the results from that were very good. Like,
yeah, and was it in Madrid or Barcelona or something? There was a concert.
That's right. Yeah, Barcelona, you know? I think, yeah.
And we all know how bad COVID was both in the UK and in Spain.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, like, look, like I think we've been on this podcast, and I think like a couple of people even kind of gave us a bit of stick at times for being kind of like, oh yeah, wear your mask, is it, lads? Oh yeah, like, you know, like not they are like conspiracy theorists, gobshites, but like I think we tried to approach the pandemic as kind of responsibly as we could, like, but at the same time, you know, vaccines are doing what we need them to do. Everybody knows the state of play now. There's no ignorance out there as such. Let us try be responsible adults. Let us try do these things in a responsible way. Like, nobody's looking to go out there and start licking each other's faces. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly, because we're getting into because of the reopening announcements and the timeline of reopening. You're going to get, and I'm not criticizing you, but you're going to get people that say, you know, the way you were saying, I for the life of me can't understand how I can sit in a cinema, but 500 people can't stay in a sports hall. Like, the biggest failure of the government last summer was doing so many contradictions like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where people were then saying, oh, so you're telling me you can do this and you can't do that. And I'm kind of going, who gives a fuck? Just be responsible. Just be fucking responsible. I mean, so this time round in the summer, I think they're being extra cautious because they did fail with the communication last summer. Varadkar did skip stage 4 and stage 5 for July and August because he got ahead of himself. And that's why we were delayed. But now we have the vaccination program. So just we'll get there. I'm very positive we'll get there, and we'll soon be talking about this in past tense. So
that's it. Yeah.
Anyway, Danny,
stay the course, lads. And when your turn comes, get your vaccine. It'll make all the difference. And you know, even if you're not sure for you, do it for someone else because there's people out there who need to be protected.
Yeah, don't be anti-vax. Our guest this week is TD and People Before Profit member Richard Boyd Barrett.
With special guest Dail Bell.
Explain the Dail Bell before we go into the interview, please.
So, Richie was joining us live from the Dail, which is currently sitting in the convention centre. And as he explains to us very early on, there are the series of bells that will chime and ring when the Dail is either going into vote or it's going into debate and all that kind of thing. And it's how deputies are told get into chamber or something is coming or whatever the case might be. So you will hear frequently in this episode prolonged ringing of the bells, lads. We do apologise. Completely out of our hands, completely out of Richie's hands. Nature of the beast. You're getting to talk to one of the leading opposition members of Dun Laoghaire, and they're doing it live from the Dail on location. You're going to get background noise. You're getting the live experience, lads. You wouldn't get it elsewhere. That's all I'm saying. So, you know, People for Profit TD, Richard Boyd Barrett.
We'd like to welcome back and the return of always my number one preference vote in the area when he's going for Dail, Richard Boyd Barrett. How are you, Richie?
Good, Graham. Delighted to be back. Glad you're willing to have me back.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be a tough love one, okay? We're going to be giving out the money joking.
Oh, Jeannie, can you hear that now? The bell has started.
Yeah.
Can you hear that?
Yeah.
So Richie is actually in the convention centre as we're recording this, and he might be called to vote on some motion. So it's going to be a tricky one in that if he gets called for some motions, he will have to leg it. So bear with us, and it might be a bit exciting.
I'll try and take you with me.
Yeah.
Graham and Danny.
So what is that noise? So what is that noise, Richie? Explain to us what that is.
That are the bells. The bells.
To say what?
Well, this particular bell is saying the Dail was suspended for 5 minutes because the minister wasn't around to come in for the next debate. You know, because there like to be multiple debates and sessions going on in here in a day. Normally they go fairly seamlessly from one to the next, but sometimes if a minister isn't here or whatever, there might be a slight delay. So that was just saying we're back in session now. It stopped about.
It goes on for long enough, doesn't it?
Oh, wait till you see when the bells for the voting go. Then your head will be really done in. It goes on for about 3 minutes, 4 minutes.
It puts the Angelus to shame.
Yeah. It's bad. And what's even worse is when you're in Leinster House, if there's a different bell for committees than there is for the Dail. So if the two go off at the same time, it would literally fry your brain. And sometimes they do a fire drill at the same time then as well.
Oh, lovely. So Richie, what time did you get out there at now this evening?
It varies now because it depends. Like currently as scheduled, if everything went exactly as it was scheduled, I could be in here till 11:30 tonight. But I think things will go short. Some of the debates are moving a bit faster because there wasn't a huge amount of interest. You know, it would be different. There's some bills that everybody is really interested in and think they're important or they're controversial, and then they could drag on for ages. If it's a bill that's not terribly controversial, then there mightn't be as many people speaking, or if it's a niche thing that there's only particular people are interested in, then it can go quicker. So that's what seems to be happening here tonight.
Right. Come here and I ask you, Rich, just keeping it local momentarily, before we get into the nitty gritty. I was kind of disappointed and sad to see local councillor Hugh Lewis, who was a brilliant councillor in our area and former People Before Profit member, has said he has left the party. Is there anything there? I've talked to you personally, so I don't want to get into I don't know what the story is there, but would you like to make a comment on that? Or?
Obviously, I thought you'd ask me about it, and I'm sure it's a surprise to people. But I know that Hughie doesn't want to say much, and at this point, I would rather not say a lot. But the only thing I would say is that I have not fallen out with Hughie politically or personally in any way, and he hasn't fallen out with me politically or personally in any way. I think at this point it'd probably be better not to comment further.
Yeah, very well.
Okay.
If I'd say a lot of people were probably concerned that the two of you might have had a fallen out, but it's probably refreshing to hear that you haven't, not. And you are probably still aligned the same side of the politics. So, that's good to hear.
Good, yeah, agreed. And obviously, we wish you all the best as well with everything. But to try and keep it local, but kind of change gear a little bit. With restrictions lifting on one thing and the other, Richie. Friend of the show, Keith Kelly, the man behind Jumpers for Goalposts. Hopefully, we'll be getting that initiative back up and running. You attended a few of them. Hopefully, we'll be seeing you between the sticks at the next one.
Yeah.
Or between the
the jumpers.
Between the jumpers, I should say, yeah.
Yeah, leaper the keeper. But listen, Keith is brilliant, and it's such a brilliant initiative, So, and I think it's just taken off, hasn't it? It's just gone on all over the country, and that mental thing is just so important, isn't it? And it's probably always been a big thing, but people didn't want to talk about it, and there was stigma attached to it. People having really difficult periods in their life, and having a crisis, mental health crisis, but not being able to talk about it. And it's great that we're kind of getting to a point that we're beginning to acknowledge these things. And I think Keith's initiative is just brilliant in that regard, and particularly reaching out to people of my generation and his generation, slightly older men, or how do we describe ourselves now? People in our 50s, middle age, maybe
midlife crisis.
Sort of young middle age. I like to think young middle age.
So you'll be down at the next one then?
For sure. Yeah. Now I could be hobbling around the pitch by the. Yeah, no, it's brilliant, and Keith's a legend, and let's hope we get it all back up and running real soon.
Brilliant. Richie, I just wanted to touch on the death of Philip Windsor.
Jesus, Maro.
Yeah.
I know. I say this as a People Before Profit supporter and a supporter of left in general. I was a bit annoyed at the stuff that came out, but I don't see why you had to include Mary Lou McDonald's name in the poster, and in as far as we won't be following Mary Lou McDonald's lead in her statement in which she was kind of for anyone of that persuasion on the islands, we send our condolences. Be a fair criticism on my part, or what was the thinking there in terms of
to be
post?
Well, to be honest, now didn't have any particular involvement in that post. I mean, the good thing, I suppose, these days is People Before Profit is a lot bigger of an organisation. So, and I'm glad to say it isn't centrally controlled. I don't control it, and the TDs don't control it. We've lots of activists, and there's people who put out posts. There was a debate, I have to say, after that post, as to, was it quite the way to put it? I think there was general consensus that the Connolly, there was a post put up with a quote from Connolly, which was about monarchs, basically doing nothing for anybody ever in history, and that and that it was, workers that had brought progress and good things to society. So probably I was very much behind that way of doing it. There was a little bit of a difference of opinion about whether precisely the way it was presented was the best way to present it. But, people, I suppose what was running behind it is the fact that, as a socialist, when you don't believe in monarchy, when you really think monarchy is, it's not just an anachronism, it's sort of a front to any idea of democracy or
absolutely,
in the world,
But my feeling on it was just that when I saw it and I saw Mary Lou being referenced in a kind of graphic design poster officially from People Before Profit, I was just kind of the way of why are they nitpicking at something when we're on the same side in as far as the opposition against Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, Green Party, and it's kind of like, is that a low blow considering, like, I thought Mary Lou was right to say what she said in terms of the people of that persuasion on the island, because we do have loyalists on the island that if and when a United Ireland happens, we do have to cater for their thought process. I don't believe in monarchs. I despair of monarchs.
Yeah.
I don't get them
actually,
at all.
Graham, look, I mean, I didn't see that. I didn't know there was a reference to Mary Lou. And so I actually, genuinely, and I'm not just saying, I'm not dodging the question, I didn't actually know there was a reference to Mary Lou in it. Because I genuinely don't follow all the sort of memes or whatever that are put out. What I will say, though, and this is without taking pot shots, and I'd like to think we don't take pot shots for the sake of it, I think there is underlying it, there is a bit of a political difference about how we approach the United Ireland question, which I think it is going to come into view. I mean, we're very much in favour of campaigning at the moment for a border poll, for the idea that, now more than ever in the aftermath of Brexit and even COVID, that the case is strengthening for United Ireland. And we're very proactively campaigning for it. And I think there's two different ideas about how we might go about achieving a United Ireland and ending partition. And I think this may be a difference of emphasis between us and Sinn Féin or Mary Lou. I don't know. I mean, we have to debate it, but I think it's going to become a very live debate. And that is, do we say the way to unite the country is to say what we need to do is sort of accommodate green and orange, right? Or, and this is our view, do we want to say we want to overcome that notion of tribal green and orange sort of divisions to create a different Ireland, so that the United Ireland isn't just joining together green and orange, but it is actually moving beyond green and orange to a socialist Ireland, a different Ireland, and that it's about actually beginning to emphasize the things that bridge the gap between Catholic and Protestant. Like, for example, think about COVID. It's obvious in the context of COVID, if it wasn't before, we need an all-Ireland health service, single-tier national health service. I mean,
absolutely.
if you were in the north, why on earth would you want to be part of the two-tier health system down here, right? It doesn't make, because, I mean, the national health system has been run down, but at least there is a thing called the national health system. in the UK, fought for by working class British people, basically, in the aftermath of the Second World War. And it's a good thing. Why would they want to be part of a place where, you know, the Catholic Church run half our hospitals and it's a two-tier system? You get different healthcare if you can go to the Beacon than if you go to, you know, St. Michael's or public hospital, right?
Absolutely.
So I think we have to make the case in those terms. That's why we need to end the green-orange sectarian division, because we need to unite working people to fight for an all-Ireland National Health Service. And I would say the same about, you know, workers' rights or whatever, that actually Catholic and Protestant workers, North and South, have an interest in ending sectarian division, because workers are weaker if they're divided along religious or cultural lines. So we think actually we need to break down that notion that there's an intrinsic, fundamental, cultural or religious division between working people, North and South, Catholic and Protestant. Whereas I think some will approach it and saying, no, what we need to do is get a few unionists into government. We need to accommodate green and orange, and that's how we'll get a united Ireland. I don't think that'll work. I think you need to actually challenge sectarianism.
Very good.
Now that's not apropos the exact post you were talking about, but I do think there's a political debate underlining it.
Absolutely, yeah, there is. In terms of the election last year and talks with opposition parties like Sinn Féin and Social Democrats, how close were we at all from forming that?
From a left government?
Yeah.
I think we were pretty close. I mean, we didn't get the majority, right? We didn't get a majority to make a left majority government. But Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael didn't have a majority either. That's a historic first after 100 years, you know, and that was the sort of slogan, wasn't it, during the election? Break the cycle of 100 years of Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael rule. Okay, they're still in government, but they couldn't do it. Even together, they couldn't form a majority. Like, wow, that's such a big change. Huge, when between the two of them, they had 80%. So, okay, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael didn't have a majority, but neither did the left. And then we had people in the middle, you know, your sort of gene pool independents from rogues from Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, or whatever. So, like, we're at a crossroads in Irish political history. There's no doubt about it. And we were close. And we argued, and I think we were distinct, actually, to be honest, from People for Profit, in saying it was worth trying to go for a minority left government. And we did have discussions with Sinn Féin about that. There were quite detailed discussions. We produced papers. We established quite a lot of sort of common ground as to what would be a minimum programme, at least, for such a left government. But I think, first of all, we couldn't get real buy-in. The Soc Dems, they talked to us, but they really weren't up for it. Now, it's best to ask them why they didn't. I think they were keeping an eye open for possible arrangements with the bigger parties. They might say not, so you'll have to ask them that one. Do you know what I mean?
So did you had more in common with Sinn Féin than the Soc Dems then?
I think in terms of, like, there certainly was more engagement, and the discussions were much more detailed as to, you know, what the programme of a left government might look like. The other people who were quite seriously engaged in it were people like Thomas Pringle and Catherine Connolly, who again I think would be, you know, a bit further to the left. Labour were absolutely uninterested, and I think, you know,
that's bizarre though, isn't it, considering they're polling?
They tied their colours to the mast of propping up the big parties, haven't they? I mean, that's been their history, and it's been a disastrous failure for them, is to get a surge of support, and it's happened to them many times, and then take that surge of support into propping up either Fianna Fáil or either Fine Gael, and it's been a disaster for them. And the biggest disaster, obviously, was the last Fine Gael Labour government. I mean, we're still paying the cost for that one. On housing in particular. So I don't know if there's a way back for Labour, to be honest, but it'll have to, if there's any way back for the Labour Party, they're going to have to break from that policy that they've pursued consistently, really, for the history of the state, of being willing to prop up either Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael. It just, you know, a left agenda and Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, they don't go together. They're just, they're incompatible.
No, they don't, and it would be ridiculous if the Social Democrats, as you kind of suggested, that they possibly might have been waiting for a bigger party to go into bed with, so to speak. Have they not seen the Green Party's experience from before, or Labour Party's experience before, where they're decimated? I mean, it would have been a disaster. Look, like the Green Party are going to be decimated at the next election. Well, when do you think the next election will be, Richie?
That's hard to know. I mean, like, I think the people would love one now, you know.
Yeah.
I think, you know, huge numbers of people, all those people who voted for change are gutted. Were gutted immediately that they ended with Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil back in power, courtesy of the support of the Greens. So I think there's a huge cohort, maybe nearly a majority, who would like an election tomorrow. But I think the Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael and the Greens know that. And they know that they're probably even less popular. The Greens in particular, as you say, are going to suffer devastation. So none of them really have an interest in an election because they know it's not going to go well for them. And that may be, that sort of fear of decimation may lead them to hang in, you know, for longer than you might think, for a weak and unpopular government, because they don't want to face the music of their own popularity. But it depends, doesn't it? It always depends on issues. I mean, the COVID crisis meant that everybody sort of put their heads down, get through this crisis, mostly focused on that. But as the COVID crisis hopefully starts to recede, as we saw this week with the housing thing, just all the big issues that led people to kind of break from Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael have come surging back again, you know, and rightly so, because they're such serious problems. So, you know, I think there'll be tens of thousands of people on the streets over housing if it weren't for the restrictions at the moment. I think there would have been. I think there would have been thousands on the streets over the Debenhams thing, to be honest. Were it not for COVID. So that kind of people power movement could erupt at any time and take this government out.
Do you think? Like, I'm curious on that one as well, Richie. Just the notion of a pandemic election. Like, in one sense, I'd agree. I think there is a cohort of people out there who definitely would love for there to be an election in the morning. But then I kind of look, and the opinion polls, you kind of see little movements here and there, and you kind of see these kind of, not micro movements, but from the way I'm looking at it, it seems like the government is the most unpopular government we've had in a long, long time. And yet it seems like the opposition are kind of struggling to chip away at that and to pose that real threat. And then you look across the water last week in Britain and the local elections there, and the results there baffled me. And I'm kind of like, Jesus, is it an opposition thing? Is it some sort of weird Stockholm syndrome with the government parties? Like, what is it at the moment that people aren't connecting to what's happening?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Danny. And
Very good.
Not the easiest one. Ask me some easy ones, Danny, will you?
Oh, don't worry, we'll move on to them in a bit.
Yeah.
It's an interesting point, though, isn't it? Because you're kind of like in our own little echo chambers on Twitter, and even with the kind of the left that you follow in England, you're kind of going, well, certainly not in these local elections in across the water this time around. I was predicting a decimation from Labour, but previously the last general election,
they need to get rid of Jeremy Corbyn, don't they?
yeah. But I was kind of going, the last general election, I was like, what the? Boris Johnson.
Yeah.
Sorry for interrupting anyway the question, Rich.
But look, it is an interesting question. And I mean, okay, what do I think? I think that, why is Johnson managing to hang in there, considering the mess he made, particularly the outbreak of COVID and just the fact that he's a right-wing, you know, buffoon? A complete buffoon. How is he hanging in there? Well, definitely Keir Starmer is like, you know, a damp squib, a wet rag, and, you know, is not left, right? You know,
how can you be left and accept the knighthood?
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, to me, the Corbyn thing was very exciting because for the first time, it looked like we had somebody who was genuinely committed to radical left politics. But Jesus, did the establishment go after him? I mean, they really went after him, and his own party went after him. And I suppose if you were to say what was the mistake of Corbyn was to believe that he could take the Labour Party with him when the Labour Party was full of Blairites, the people who'd absolutely sold their soul as socialists, you know. In fact, none of them actually would even describe themselves, I suspect, as socialists. Do you know what I mean? Blair had led a counter-revolution in the Labour Party. Corbyn sort of, you know, took the Blairites by surprise and was swept into the leadership through really a movement of young people, a massive movement of young and working class people desperately looking for an alternative. And the Blairites were at 6s and 7s. So there was a sudden moment where the radical left seized the leadership of the Labour Party, and there was that opportunity. But then you had an entire political establishment, including the Blairite kind of apparatus of the Labour Party, out to stab him in the back, to destroy him. And I suppose the lesson there is, it's hard to change the Labour Party. What actually happens is the Labour Party changes you. And you know, that they have just lost their way as a party of the left. And I think that's why I think we need to create a genuinely radical socialist party of the working class that isn't compromised by that sort of politics of just wanting to be in power for the sake of it. Or wanting to be part of the establishment for the sake of it. So that is the challenge, and it's not an easy challenge. I mean, Connolly, it's Connolly's anniversary today. Connolly, the greatest socialist this country ever had, but you know, he didn't build an organisation that was big enough, and he paid with his life because of it. And the Irish Revolution was somewhat stillborn in terms of the great hopes and aspirations of that revolution because the left weren't strong enough. You know, and so that remains the task, to build a big, radical socialist working class party that is made up of thousands and thousands of activists. It isn't just a few individuals, but is a really powerful movement on the ground.
Why do people fear the label socialist?
Well, there's no doubt Stalinism, you know, what happened in Eastern Europe, you know, the Chinese, communists, you know, that discredited the left. And the much of the radical left, wrongly in my opinion, you know, because our tradition was never of this view. We always had the slogan going way back, you know, to the Stalinist period. We were set up precisely on the slogan, neither Washington nor Moscow, but international socialism. So we didn't see Stalinism as a model, but unfortunately a lot of the radical left in the period really from the 1930s all the way up to the collapse of the Berlin Wall, the Workers' Party, you know, official Sinn Féin, the parts of the Labour left, the Communist Party, all believed that Soviet Russia was a model of socialism, and I think that was a disastrous mistake. And of course when those what were in effect dictatorships collapsed in the face of a massive mobilization of the working class of those places, suddenly a certain model of socialism collapsed with it, and it was discredited. But I don't think what collapsed had anything to do with the ideas of James Connolly, or for that matter, Karl Marx or Rosa Luxemburg or Engels, or the real Marxist tradition. It was a bastardization of socialism, using the name but having nothing to do with the actual project of socialism. And if people think, well, how could that happen? Just think about the way, you know, we've had Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael governments who put up statues to James Connolly and James Larkin. Doesn't mean they actually believe in them.
No.
Sometimes they stick up the statues precisely because they want to kind of, you know, neutralize their memory. We're okay as long as they're statues, but we just don't want them. We don't want the live thing.
Yeah, we don't want them. Yeah, exactly. We don't want the live thing. Jesus, wept. You mentioned Rosa Luxemburg there. Would you have done a lot of kind of reading into Rosa Luxemburg as you were getting your feet into socialism?
Yeah. I mean, I don't claim to be an absolute expert, but she was a legend, you know, German socialist. One of the few, along with Connolly and Lenin and Trotsky, you know, I mean, there were literally a handful of people who, in the international socialist movement at the time, which was essentially the Labour, it had a different name then. It was called the Second International, but it was the international agglomeration of Labour type parties. They were all part of that. but only a handful of them came out and opposed the First World War when it broke out. They'd said before the war, we will oppose any war between the big powers. And then when the actual war broke out, most of the so-called Socialist Party supported the war. And the only people who didn't were Rosa Luxemburg, Karl Liebknecht, her German colleague, people like Connolly and Larkin, and people like Lenin and Trotsky. You know, literally a handful of people said this is an absolute betrayal of what what socialism is about. And Luxemburg then began to try and rebuild a genuine socialist politics in Germany, and obviously was very inspired by the experience of the Russian Revolution, but paid with her life because it didn't succeed, and she was dumped in a canal, shot, despite a fantastic history, brilliant books she wrote about the role of mass strikes in bringing about socialist change. And she was a brilliant theorist, but a brilliant activist, an incredibly courageous woman, and paid for her life. But she still continues to inspire socialist and working class activists in Germany and across the world. So her legacy, like Connolly's, is still very much alive.
You mentioned strikes there, Rich, and it sparks in my brain images everybody has seen recently, especially on social media and whatever, of pickets outside Debenhams stores and everything else. You introduced a motion into the Dáil this morning, People for Profit Day. Tell us a little bit about what's going on.
It's a shit show, isn't it?
Oh, it's just disgraceful. I mean, these were workers who had worked, many of them for 20 and 30 years for Debenhams, given loyal service. And then one day in March, they get an email just saying, you're gone. The company's liquidated, no notification, get out of the building. I mean, their belongings are still in those buildings. Imagine that. In the whole 400 days it was this week that they've been in dispute with the company after the liquidation, and some of their belongings and their bags and stuff. That's how, contemptuous the company and the liquidators were about the treatment of these people. It was just beyond appalling what was done to them. And the company had obviously pre-planned this. It was a tactical liquidation. It had shifted around assets. It loaded debts onto the Irish company in order to make it look as if it had no assets, in order to avoid paying what had been an agreement between the company and the workers for statutory redundancy, which is 2 weeks per year of service plus 2 weeks, right? That was the agreement they had with the workers, and all of that just reneged on. And this was happening while Debenhams Online was continuing to function, continuing to generate very significant revenues, while Debenhams in the UK was still operating. But a consortium, which included Bank of Ireland, had taken over, right? So behind this, by the way, in case people didn't know, was a consortium of investors. And we'll get on to housing, investors who buy up companies and decide how they can, take the assets and run and dump people. Sounds like a familiar story, doesn't it? And but what was great, what they didn't count on was the workers not being willing to take it lying down. And it's just, I mean, in the very dark sort of period of the pandemic and in the pretty dark situation they found themselves in, I have to say one of the really bright spots of the last year and a half has been getting to know those Debenhams workers, because they are just fantastic people, mostly women, not all women, a few men in there, but mothers and grandmothers, the absolute salt of the earth, dignity and decency kind of embodied, you know what I mean? And
Richie, has the Taoiseach or the Taoiseach met with the strikers?
Actually, I'm not sure if the Taoiseach has it. The Taoiseach did go down to some of the picket lines, I think, in Cork. And
the government, now, how come the government can't step in and help here?
Well, that's the point, isn't it? And we raised it repeatedly. We had 3 motions in the Dáil, as well as the bill today. We had motions in the Dáil. Other people brought motions in the Dáil in the opposition. We forced ministers to go down and talk to them and have meetings with them, but they basically just said, there's nothing we can do. It's very complicated, company law, all that. But this was all nonsense, because this had happened before. It had happened with company called Vita Cortex in Cork. It had happened with La Senza. I remember being involved in occupation out in City West, I think a decade ago, or exactly the same situation that happened. It happened with Cleary's, very similar situation. It's happened more recently now, even after Debenhams, with the Arcadia workers. That's people in Dorothy Perkins and a load of other firms that work under that Arcadia banner. Exactly the same thing has happened. So there was commitments made at the time of Cleary's. They were going to change the law to give priority to collective agreements for workers and redundancy agreements for workers, and change those things. But they never did anything. And their excuse is, well, I don't know actually what their excuse is. It's complicated. It's difficult. But my belief is that they just don't want to do anything which frightens the horses of big business.
So what's your bill suggesting to change?
Our bill is suggesting that workers go to the top of the sort of priority list when it comes to being creditors in terms of their redundancy agreements, right? That they go to the top of the priority list so that the assets would be used to honor their collective agreements, and also that those collective agreements would become like a debt. They'd have the same status legally as a debt obligation for the company, and that again would make it more likely that the assets would be disposed of to the benefit of the workers and any collective agreements that they had around redundancy. I mean, it is worth saying there's more things that need to be done. We couldn't get everything into the bill because drawing up bills is difficult. The government could do it easily, but we don't have the same resources. But there needs to be also legislation to stop companies hiding assets behind different subsidiaries. This is another thing they did. Like there's Debenhams Ireland, there's Debenhams Online, there's Debenhams UK, there's subsidiaries, right? And they shift around debts and assets and liabilities in order to cook the books, so it looks as if they have no assets. When somebody like the workers might come looking for them. And that's also how a lot of the big corporations avoid tax.
So why would the government vote against your bill?
Because they are dancing to the tune of big business interests. And big businesses in this country would be terrified at the thought that workers would take priority over, for example, the banks that are standing behind in the consortium. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. That might be owed money. Or particular big suppliers, maybe. Big corporate suppliers to those companies. So yeah, they don't, and also just generally, they don't want to. The way they see it is, we're frightening away investment by giving workers rights. So in a choice between investors and workers, the investors always win. And when we move on to the housing thing, isn't that what we're having the debate about the cuckoo funds this week?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And in actual fact, the cuckoo funds, the vulture funds, they're all going on the last 10, 12 years. In terms of e-housing prices, we'll move on to that. My profile, 36, wheelchair user, full-time job. I've currently no prospect of buying a house because single person and with a disability. How can we make this better, and will it get better? How can we make that better? Not only for my profile, but there's many people like me who are disabled, who are wheelchair users, who are in their mid-30s, and they can't get accommodation.
Yeah, just as you asked that question, the bells go. Can you hear them now?
Yeah,
in the background. It's so annoying. Oh, so Paul Murphy's just beside me. He says we have till 8:30 to
Oh, lovely. How are you, Paul?
Good man, Paul.
Yeah. Yeah. How do we solve it? How do we address this? Well,
it's not even like how do we solve it or address it. It's like there's an issue out there anyway for able-bodied people, and I'm not looking to the answer to be solely on the disabled, but I want you to include an answer that involves both able-bodied people and, say, wheelchair users, disabled people who can't. The houses aren't, the accessible houses aren't being built. My basketball coach bought a house 2 years ago in Leopardstown, 2-story house. Him and his wife are both working. They have a 3-year-old daughter, and they couldn't afford a stair lift. They had to be earning less than €21,000 a year in order to avail of a grant for a stair lift. So that house didn't work out for them because he's in his mid-40s and he found himself crawling up and down the stairs to get to bed or to get to the toilet.
Yeah.
He kept the wheelchair at the top of the stairs. I mean, like, it's 2022, like.
Yeah, well, that's incredible. I mean, okay, there's a specific thing there around disability generally, which is, I think, this UNCRPD thing, and the government ratified it 10 years after it said it was going to. It had to be forced.
But they didn't ratify the option, though. They didn't ratify the option.
That's exactly the point I was going to make, Graham. They didn't ratify the optional protocol, which would actually make it legally binding, and so that people could hold them legally to account for not actually making equality a reality. And that's deliberate. That's deliberate because they know they would have to then put the resources into actually making equality a reality, and that would work its way through everything. It would work its way through transport. It would work its way through employment, equal opportunity in terms of employment and access to employment, and it would work its way through into housing. So these things would be rights. You wouldn't have to be, and you shouldn't. It's outrageous that people are sort of having to plead and beg and urge or protest for these things when they should be basic human rights, and that's what we've got to get to. But if you want to know why does this government resist, it's because in order to actually give people their rights and to have the sort of equality we deserve, you have to start to redistribute the wealth away from these investor types. Because if you're an investor, right, making a place accessible, making a place affordable, making it high quality is just a cost. That's the way they see it. It's just a cost. And they're interested in profit. So they're not interested in meeting needs. They're not interested in, what people actually need. They're just saying, how do we make money out of this? And that is the problem. In every single area, the government is dancing to people whose priority is making money and not meeting the needs or vindicating the rights of people. I think that's the fundamental problem we have in our society.
That's bonkers in the sense that like me and you have spoken at those nights where we have parents who are carers with kids with disabilities. We have adults with disabilities, and they all have their pain points and their issues that as you say, they have to fight for. Like, how does Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, and now the Green Party, how do they think that's fair?
Yeah. I mean, I often wonder that, Graham. I scratch my head sometimes at the things they do, the decisions they make, the votes that happen in here. It's like when they go in tonight and vote against our bill on Debenhams. Well, actually, they're afraid to vote against it because they know how popular Debenhams workers are, but they've deferred it for a year, right? This is for 10 years after Cleary's, they've done nothing. They've deferred it for a year. They just hope it goes away.
So if they defer that for a year, the Debenhams strikers will still strike for another year. And where are we at?
Yeah, well, that's the point.
Defer it again, will they?
Yeah, and that's what they do with things. They deferred the UNCRPD for 11 years after saying they were going, we're all for signing up to the UN Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities, but then they don't actually ratify it for 11 years. And then when they do, they give themselves an opt-out, essentially, of actually implementing it. And that is the way they operate. And why do they do it? I think some notion that you can't buck the system or you got to accommodate. And some of them are just part of the system. Quite a lot of them, I think, of the two major parties, they are just the representatives of the system. They're the representatives of the landlords. They're the representatives of the big business interests. And, for the public consumption, they have to pretend they're there to serve the interests of everybody. But in reality, in my opinion, they are there to serve the interests of big business, the property developers, the speculators, you know, and now the cuckoos and the vultures. You know, they brought them in. Like, it's not like an accident these vultures and cuckoos arrived to take control of the Irish housing market and make rents and house prices absolutely unaffordable for like 80% of the population. That's where we're at now. Whole generation of young people have no chance ever of ever owning a house and are being asked to pay rents that you would need like a salary of about 80,000 quid a year to pay. Right? I mean, that's where we're at. It's madness.
How long is that beeping going to go on for, Paul? Or Richie?
I know it would drive you absolutely round the twist, wouldn't it?
Does it go on for
I'd say another minute or so, and then it'll stop for a few minutes, and then it'll start again.
What's the point of it?
It's in case we don't notice a vote. What? Yeah. Sorry, Graham. That must be really Danny. It must be very annoying for you.
No, it's grand. I'm fascinated that it needs to go on as long as it does. Like I get the whole thing of like making sure, you know, TDs are aware and everything, that, you know, get to the chamber lads or whatever. But at the same time, they're not. It's mad that it goes on. Is it like that in the actual Dail as well? Like in Leinster?
Yeah.
Jesus.
There we go. Stop now.
And
can you hear that very loudly there? Can you on your end?
It was in the background, but I could hear your answer more than like it was there.
Exactly. Yeah,
it was there. So we've kind of established that it's because of profit and stuff like that. So I've two kind of winded question here and comment. Your like Air constituency of Dun Laoghaire Rathdown is quite affluent.
Yes.
In the last, since you ran for election, you've walked it, you've romped home, thankfully, with your votes. What do you think that is in terms of you getting in? So would it be okay to use the set term easy, that you got in easy?
Well, I don't know. I mean, vote-wise,
vote-wise,
I did well, but it wasn't easy.
And no, it's not easy, I suppose, in the campaign trail. But when you go to Paddy Power and they give the odds, Richard Boy Barrett is always like 1 to 14 or something like that. You know what I mean? But my point being that we're from an affluent area, and if I'm in work or any social setting, and I always out myself as a Richard Boy Barrett number one voter.
Fair play to you, thanks, I appreciate that.
The criticism is always like, he's for the birds, he's always moaning, he's always protesting, and another criticism when I'm kind of talking about businesses, big tech and stuff like that, in terms of non-compliance of corporation tax, like the people that I'm engaged in conversation with are like, what do you want the big companies to do? Walk out and leave the jobs behind? And I'm kind of going, mate, the corporation tax is 12.5%. They're not paying anything. It's zero. They're not paying 1%. You know, so in terms of, I suppose I'm waffling in terms of an anecdote and conversation that I've had in the past. But when you're going to affluent areas canvassing, what is the feedback you get in terms of, I couldn't vote for you, Richie?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, there's no doubt that the biggest vote I get is in Ballybrack, Sallynoggin, Monkstown Farm, Ratsalla. Do you know what I mean? It is working class areas. And whether you live in Dun Laoghaire constituency or whether you live in, Dublin Central, the fact of the matter is, if you're a worker or if you're dependent on social welfare or if you're a state pensioner, you get the same income. So the fact that you live in a well-off area doesn't actually make you more well-off. In fact, in some cases, it can make you less well-off because things can be more expensive in a well-off area. So I think, sometimes there's a caricature of Dun Laoghaire constituency, but the truth about it is the housing crisis, for example, is more acute in Dun Laoghaire than almost anywhere else, because average house prices in Dublin are 390,000. Average house prices in Dun Laoghaire are 540,000. Average rents nationally, and they're extortionately high, are about €1,500 a month. Average cost for a 1-bedroom in Sallynoggin at the moment, right, is 1,700 in our area.
That needs to get in the bin.
Is 2,300 for 2-bedroom and 2,600 for 3-bedroom. And, you know, forget it if you want to try Killiney or Torquay, right? So we are so far off the Richter scale in terms of the cost of rent and the cost of housing. So the housing crisis is worse. And people know that in Dun Laoghaire, do you know what I mean? And there's very few people. I mean, okay, we've got a few rich people, but that's out of the reach of the vast majority of people, even people on fairly decent wages. You know, like Tara O'Brien was saying, for our area, you know, they have this new affordable housing scheme, right? But now the whole idea of affordable, in my mind, is affordable according to your income, right? But they have a different affordable level depending on where you live, right? So affordable in our area is 450,000, according to the government. That's affordable.
They're playing fast and loose with the word affordable, aren't they?
Yeah. Yeah, but of course it's not affordable. Do you know how much you have to be earning to be able to get a mortgage off a bank for a house of 450,000? You'd have to be earning €120,000.
Yeah,
that's, you know, i.e., that's most people forget it.
How can they say that with a straight face?
It's hard to understand. I mean, the last few days we've been raising these things with Tara O'Brien, and I just, you know, we haven't really heard an answer.
But Richie, why aren't we looking for a vote no confidence in that man when he has invested in vulture funds himself? How is there a vote of no confidence not against him?
Yeah,
how in any other country you'd see these politicians be sacked if they have a vested interest in a vulture fund where the vulture funds are buying up apartment blocks and buying up estates for profit, and 10,000 people remain homeless. How is that allowed? Like, how is he not sacked or how is he not reprimanded? That's just bonkers to me. It's like the 52% of the government are landlords. Like you're just after explaining the rental prices of a single bed flat in the Noggin for $1,600 a month.
Yeah.
What the fuck? Like?
Yeah.
Rent. So how are you supposed to save for a mortgage if the rent for 1 bedroom is £1,600?
Yeah, you can't. You just can't. It's just not possible. Like, so we are in serious trouble unless we address this. Now, I mean, if we built public and affordable housing on our own land, we could do it, and we could do it relatively cheap. You know, it can be done. But when profit comes into it, when the speculators are bidding up the price of land and the value of land the way they are by hoarding the land, that's what they do. They buy up the land banks, they get a planning permission on it, that adds to its value. Then they sit on it and wait until the prices are as high as they could possibly be, and then they might build a few. But
how did we build so many in the 50s, 60s, and 70s?
Because it was the state built them.
So there was no developer, there was no...
There was private development, but about between 40 and 50% in any given year was built by the state, and that kept prices overall down. It dampens it down. You see, I mean, if the state is building, say, 50% of the houses, if it's building houses for, let's say, for normal rental, council houses, right, where you only pay 15% of your income, depending on what your income is, that's the way council rents work, or if it's affordable and they say, you know, you can only pay, say, 30% of your income in a mortgage, right? And no more than that, right? So if that would mean that the average house price would be about 200,000, right? That'd be manageable for people on sort of average industrial earnings or earning 40 or 50 grand or whatever, right? That'd be manageable. And then the private developer wouldn't be able to sell it for 450,000 because people say, why would we buy a house off you for 450,000 if we can get one down the road? Because the state is building them for 200,000, right? And so by building public housing and affordable housing on public land, you dampen the entire market down and so it actually benefits everybody. Even people who are not going to apply for state-provided social and affordable housing, that even they would benefit from there being much, much more social and affordable housing. It would keep the prices and the rents down for everybody. And in fact, this is the reason why I think the government's affordable housing is actually not affordable, because I think the developers have said to the government, geez, you can't be building affordable housing that's actually affordable, because if you're building houses for 200,000, say, on Shangana prison site, sure, how are we going to sell houses or apartments up in Cherrywood for 400 grand? That's what in my opinion, that's what's going on.
Yeah.
And because
is that a cynical look at it, Rich, or is that?
No, I think they're being lobbied by these people. And if you look at I'm really trying to ring the alarm bells about this land development agency bill that is going through the Dáil, and it's going to be voted on in the next few weeks, right? And we're really trying to scream, this is like NAMA Part 2, except now they're going to plunder the public land bank. NAMA was about getting all that land that the private developers and speculators had, and that we had to bail out, right? And then they flogged it back all to the Vulture funds and the Cuckoo funds, 40 billion worth of it. But what the Land Development Agency is going to do the same thing to the public land bank, right? So the Land Development Agency will be in charge of development on all local authority owned land in the country, all HSE land, all CIE land, all, anything, Office of Public Works, you name it, right? So the entire public land bank. And in this legislation, it basically empowers the minister to set up deals with these investment vehicles on public land, and to make developments on public land designated activity companies. So whereas previously, if you were building housing on public land, council housing or even affordable housing, right, it was owned by the local authority. The land was owned and controlled, and it was, it was ours, and it was supposed to serve a social purpose. If this Land Development Agency goes through, it'll be taken out of the hands of the councils completely. We'll have no democratic control over it. And the money will be, the finance will come from these international funds, and they will demand their pound of flesh.
And they're looking to put this through the Dáil. They're an absolute disgrace, they are.
Yeah.
They're a disgrace. And
there's the bell again.
There we go.
There's the bell. Before we let you go now, Rich. But thanks for all your time. We've gone over what we do in time, but we didn't get to mention the current state of affairs in Palestine. Our ambassador in Israel has been summoned because our Foreign Affairs Minister Simon Coveney had expressed that kids in Gaza shouldn't be killed over this, and all of a sudden our guy in Israel is summoned. So considering the Salisbury poisoning in England, where there was alleged Russian involvement, and we expelled the Russian ambassador because of that, what will it take for Ireland to take action in terms of expelling the Israeli ambassador?
Yeah,
do you think that should happen? Do you think that should
100%. I mean, to be honest, I think we should have sanctions exactly the same as we had against apartheid South Africa. So I think we should break all diplomatic and economic trade links, everything with Israel, because it is the same kind of rogue state as apartheid South Africa was. And remember, that's how apartheid was brought down. And speaking of, Debenhams, like the antecedents of Debenhams were the Dun strikers, the anti-apartheid Dun strikers, and they went on strike for 2 years to force the Irish government to introduce sanctions against apartheid South Africa. And even Nelson Mandela credited that action of solidarity as playing a very major role in the international campaign to finally bring down apartheid. So I think we have a very important role in that regard, and we have a great tradition of it. Because Ireland, the people of Ireland are absolutely behind the people of Palestine. Because they see the connections with our own history, and so that's what should happen. We should play a leading role in the struggle against the apartheid state of Israel and impose sanctions, boycott, divestment sanctions against Israel in order to force the dismantling of the apartheid racist state that it is. I mean, since its foundation, it's just ethnically cleansed, more than 1 million Palestinians. There's 6 million Palestinians living in refugee camps in Syria and Lebanon, the most appalling conditions. They've murdered thousands of people, arbitrary detention, the annexation of territory, the demolition of homes, the eviction of people. It's just, it just goes on and on and on. And it's going to take that kind of international action. And what we've seen the last few days is just further example. It's not like an isolated incident from one government. This is the nature of that state. I think we have to demand its dismantling. And I think by the way, it's a state that's bad for Jewish and Arab people and Palestinian people, because it's like a vicious form of institutionalized sectarianism and division that's bad for everybody. I look forward to the day that apartheid can be brought down like it was in South Africa, and then Palestinian and Israeli, Jew and Arab, Christian and people of no religion can live in equality. Do
you see that happening with the amount of inaction over the last 10 years with these? Do you see that happening? Because I was talking to Danny about this last night, and I wouldn't be surprised in the next 18 years or so that there will be no Palestine.
Well, I think I'm gonna walk up now and vote while I'm talking to you.
Lovely.
So I think actually it's more likely than the idea of a two-state solution, because a two-state solution is now nearly impossible. Israel has grabbed and continues to grab all the land that was designated for the Palestinians in the so-called two-state solutions. There's almost nothing left for the Palestinians to have a state.
That's what I mean, yeah.
But actually, historic.
You're gone, Rich.
He must have went down a stairwell and lost the internet.
The Wi-Fi is gone, bud.
Well, hang on and see. When he comes back out from the stairs, he might reappear.
Yeah.
Graham?
He's back?
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
No, you're absolutely grand. Don't worry, man. We were just trying to text you to say don't sweat it, because the bell is tolling for you there.
Okay, here you are.
No, look at this.
Look at this. We're live in the convention centre.
Or behind the scenes. Are you going to get in trouble for this now, Rich?
No, I'll be okay.
All right. The Count Corley giving you a guff now.
Say nothing.
we were just trying to finish up, Richie, on my concern that Palestine won't be around in 2040.
So say that again, Graham.
My concern is that Palestine will not be around. Me and Danny had this discussion last night where I compared it to the ethnic cleansing in Yugoslavia, where Slobodan Milosevic was done for war crimes. And I think do you think that's a fair comparison?
To what's happening with the Palestinians, that we're talking about war crimes?
Yeah.
Without a shadow of a doubt. And I mean, international organizations have described it as war crimes. What's going on in Gaza, the siege of Gaza, is it's a form of collective punishment of a people. That is a war crime by, under the international definition. The indiscriminate shelling of civilian areas. I mean, you saw today, and this has happened multiple occasions over the last number of years, where missiles being fired into apartment blocks, just residential apartment blocks, indiscriminate killing. These are war crimes, and they have to be held to account for it. But the problem is, it seems that the big powers, the United States, the European Union, seem supremely uninterested in actually holding to Israel to account. And if you wanted to get into the deep politics of it, I think it's because really the purpose the Israeli state always had for the big powers was to have a reliable military ally in the strategically important region, the Middle East, to slap down movements in that region that might threaten Western control over a very important region because of all the oil, to put it, very crudely and simply. I think that's the role that Israel has played. And they were Britain first, and then America were very conscious of it. I mean, I actually was pointing out in the Dail yesterday, talking about what's happening, that
the Governor General, the British Governor General of Jerusalem in 1936, when he was describing why they were supporting what would later become the Israeli state, he said, "We want to create a little loyal Jewish Ulster in a sea of potentially hostile Arabism." So they actually modelled Israel on Ulster, on the plantations, and on the divide and rule tactics they used between Catholic and Protestant in the north. So that was the project, and it was to control the region. And I think it's still essentially the project, and that's why the United States support them so unconditionally and uncritically.
Well, they support them so much that they brokered a deal worth $38 billion for their defense in Israel. So what's Palestine's defense bill with other countries? So I think the answer is probably zero.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's massive military support, but also economic trade. I mean, I think the trade between the European Union and Israel is, in fact, Europe is the biggest trading partner of Israel. And trade last year was about 41 billion euro. So they, there's money in it for certain interests, and therefore they don't want to call these people to account. But what actually shows you why is if we actually imposed economic sanctions of the sort that were imposed on South Africa, we could have a huge influence. We could put real pressure on Israel to behave properly.
Anyways, Rich, we'll love you and leave you. You're about to vote there in the Dail, so in the convention centre. Really appreciate your time. You're after giving us a little tour of the convention centre on your way there to your chair. So we'll speak again soon, and thanks for your time.
Yeah, great to talk to you, Graham, as always. Danny, brilliant to talk to you.
Thanks
for having me on.
Really appreciate it.
See you at the next Jumpers for Goalposts, Rich.
Yeah, 100%.
Absolutely.
All right.
Take
Good
care.
luck, man.
Richard. All the best, man. Thank you.
See you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Enjoyed that. I make no secret of it. I don't consider myself a lefty as such. I wouldn't be politically Richard Boyd Barrett's biggest fan, but I've a lot of time for him as a person, and he's grown on me over the years, shall I say?
Yeah, he certainly has since we first started. Now that's the second time we've had Richard on. We had him on in our first year, and we had a good conversation. But yeah, you in our private conversations, you have, I think with more adult responsibility and more kind of real world experience, I think you're kind of leaning more to that way of thinking as a floating voter, if you don't mind me saying.
I do mind you saying. I don't think it's that. I think it's more so I trusted other politicians with my vote. They did not fulfill their end of the deal, as I see it.
Social contract, is it? Indeed,
yes. The feeling
has led you to County Laois, is it?
It has indeed, yeah. The spiral in house prices that Richie was referencing in the board also had a big part to play in that. Look, the Fine Gael that I previously would have thought, like, I agree with more of their stuff than I agree with others.
Just to be clear, you did not vote Fine Gael in the most recent general election.
I did not, no.
5 years previous to that.
Did I?
I just want to make that clear.
No, I think 5 years previous to that I did. I think I voted that. I actually think I can't even remember who I voted in 2016, wasn't
it? When did we start? 2015.
2015. So I think there was a general.
No, it might have been the general election in 2011. Where was the last time you voted Fine Gael?
I was going to say 2011. I definitely voted Fine Gael, and I stand over my vote for Fine Gael at that time. But I think what we've seen in the last 7 years is this emergence of a younger, more right, arrogant, disgusting type of politician coming to the fore in Fine Gael. And I'm not a fan of it. I don't like it. No time for Leo Varadkar. Absolutely zero time for Leo Varadkar personally.
What about Simon Harris?
I've no time for Simon Harris. I've very little time for. I know Owen Murphy's gone, but just he was one of the ones that I included in that kind of young right-leaning, arrogant brigade. I do have time for Simon Coveney. To be fair. But yeah, I just can't. And same when I look at Fianna Fáil and I look at Labour and I look, I think I've said it on this podcast recent enough that like if there was an election tomorrow, I would more than likely be leaning towards the Soc Dems, personally.
Yeah, and I guess with Richie there with the interview, I was a bit surprised to hear the Soc Dems weren't as open in negotiation for a minority left wing. And now that could be, now obviously we don't know why. It could have been a case of realism and saying to themselves, look, we don't think this is going to be worth our while because we don't think it's going to happen. But my ideal scenario from the outcome of that general election would have been, if the votes were there, of course, Be For Profit, Sinn Féin, Social Democrats, and the two independents. That would have been ideal. But I just hope, as a socialist, I hope that come the next general election, that there's less seemingly bickering on that side.
Yeah. I look. Politics will always be politics, unfortunately, and I think the problem is that people often look at point scoring as opposed to looking at needs. And there's this weird kind of...
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, and that's like profit before needs as well, though.
Yeah. I think there's this weird thing as well. People almost treat it like football teams. Do you know what I mean? And once you're a member of one club, you're with that club forever, kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
It's Man United, Liverpool. You know what I mean? People are, no matter how bad their team is doing and how much they look at their team and say, I can't abide by this, they won't switch allegiances. Which, look, each to their own and everything else. I'm a firm believer in thinking you're not the same person in your 30s as you were in your 20s, and you definitely won't be the same person in your 40s as you were in your 20s. So if you're holding the same political ideology, then I don't know. I don't know. I think people need to mature and need to grow and everything else, and there's no harm in looking at it and saying, I don't fully agree with what I did 10 years ago. You know?
Yeah.
What's that
Do you
saying?
think that's what...
Go on, what?
You think that's what's lacking in some government TDs, in as far as you're admitting there that as a voter, I'm grown, I wouldn't vote for the same people. Not saying that you're saying it was a mistake as such, but I personally believe that if Fianna Fáil TDs that make mistakes, like I said it in the interview in relation to Darragh O'Brien, the Minister for Housing. I mean, it's a huge conflict of interest if he has invested in budget. He invested in budget funds. He admitted, said he lost €15,000. He shouldn't be allowed to do that. He shouldn't. And people say, oh, you can invest in what he likes. No, he's a TD. He has given up his life to represent the people in his area and to represent the people of Ireland as a Minister for Housing, but yet he's investing in vulture funds.
Okay, but you see, again, and look, right, I have money invested in things, but it's not me making the decision. I've given that money to somebody who knows better and said, I want to make a few bobs so that I have a nest egg when I'm older. Look after that for me. The difference between me doing it and him doing it is that as a TD, he has to declare that. So
it came out.
No, well, okay, fine, but it came out because somewhere it had to be declared. Do you know what I mean? The point I'm trying to make is that, and I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong here, I don't think Darragh O'Brien, the private individual, went online and said, I'm going to invest 150 squirrely bobs into fucking hook, line and sinker property agent there. Do you know what I mean? I think more than likely he had money. And I'm completely open to correction here because I'm fucking wildly speculating. I've no idea if this is the case, but I'm just saying I think this is the case for most people who make an investment. They've somebody who allegedly knows better and knows more about investing, and they're like, there's a bit of savings that I have. You invest that somewhere safe for me. Yeah, I don't think, I could be wrong, but I don't think Darragh O'Brien went out and said, I'm going to invest in that firm. They look like the business to me.
I think he probably was being an opportunist because he saw that the government we're investing more and we're opening the country, opening the door and giving the keys to vulture funds and cuckoo funds. And I think he probably thought to himself, I'll get a nice return on 30,000, considering we all remember Michael Noonan's speech from Dun Laoghaire where he was welcoming these people with open arms to invest in estates and apartment blocks. So, I mean, people of that ilk that have just a spare 30,000 to invest in these vulture funds are obviously thinking, I'm going to get a nice return because the state has given the keys to these people.
But that's, I suppose that's the point I made. I do agree that it's irregular. It's not. I don't think it's right necessarily. But at the same time, is there a disconnect here as well in terms of it's one thing if through his political discourse and through his political knowledge he knew a certain company could potentially benefit from I
agree. I know what you're saying.
I
just found it odd. He was on Ireland AM during the week and he's like, I don't want vulture funds. And then 2 days later, it was revealed he'd invested in vulture funds. It's like, you don't want them, but you've invested them to make a profit.
Is there the time where Dara O'Brien, the private citizen, and what he does with his money is his business? Or is it because now he's an elected official, Caesar's wife must be above suspicion? He doesn't get that leniency that I would get, say, if I fucking turned out to have an investment in, I don't fucking know, some podcast business that I knew was going. I'm talking out my hole. You know what I mean?
I don't think it's unfair to suggest that when you become a government minister, that you should, to a certain degree, waive your private citizenship in terms of vested interest. When you are making, you're a stakeholder and you're a decision maker in a certain portfolio, and you can make decisions on that front. Like if that article didn't come to light in the Kildare housing estate, we wouldn't be at this point, even though vulture funds and the cuckoo funds are 10, 11 years old. Do you know what I mean?
In terms of the investment, and I don't know, maybe I think you're going a slightly different way here as well, and if I'm pulling it back, then tell me, we're done with that. But he wasn't minister for housing at the time he made the investment. But was he?
No, he wasn't.
Was he Fianna Fáil spokesperson for housing or anything like that?
I'm not sure, but I know he was a TD.
Yeah,
I'm not sure what he was though. To be honest, he could have been spokesperson.
Because I mean, would it be? And again, and I'm not trying to support Dara O'Brien, but I'm suppose I'm curious and I'm trying to scratch a bit of an itch in terms of, are we sometimes unduly negative towards an elected official? Like, so was he, for example, I don't know, a Fianna Fáil backbencher who, was fucking spokesperson for, I don't know, let's just say agriculture, or let's just say sport and tourism or something like that? Like, because does that make it less of a big deal that he was invested in a vulture fund than the fact that he's now involved in the housing portfolio?
I don't really understand what you're saying.
I'm saying, does it look 10 times worse because retrospectively and after the fact, after the investment, he became the Minister for Housing than if he had never become the Minister for Housing? If he had just been...
I think it does look worse. I think it looks a bit fatter head.
Right.
That he's become Minister for Housing and he once had an investment in vulture funds. Okay. I think it's everything what's wrong with the country. I think that vulture funds should not have been invited in the first place.
Yeah.
Houses should not be for profit. It should be for living, and especially when you have a housing crisis. I think when you become specifically a minister and a government ED, where when you resign, you get a hefty pension from the day that you resign, and you get, in the last 14 months, government TDs that are currently sitting have gone through 3 pay rises, 2 of which are a reconstruction of the pay decrease during the recession. So 10 years, 11 years ago, they said to themselves, we're not giving, or we're dropping, we're decreasing your wage. That has now gone back up. During a pandemic, it's. I mean, I think in terms of this, what you were saying there, the private citizen, my way of thinking is that if I'm a government TD, like actually think it's disgraceful that TDs, whether it be TDs in the opposition or TDs in government, I think the wage that they're on is enough not to apply for expenses. Why did they need to? Some of them are on 70,000, 80,000 a year. Why do they need to? Like, I mean, some of the bills for, say, the Healy Rails for Ireland was crazy over the years. I mean, and my way of thinking, like, is that you're on a nice wage. I'm not telling you how to run your money and stuff like that, but surely you can pay for your own earning or your own taxis, like. Do you know what I mean? Taxis from Dail to go to a restaurant or to go to somewhere for lunch or to a hotel, like, and then claim it on expenses is fucking cheap. Like.
Do you know what this conversation has reminded me of, Graham?
Well,
it's reminded me of exactly why we said we won't do political podcasts again.
I know, yeah. We leave it there. It was a great interview with Richie.
Yeah, I did enjoy the chat with Richie. Look, lads, we're not a political podcast. We get carried away with ourselves from time to time. We're not a political podcast, and yeah, look, it was a rant, but it is what it is.
It is what it is. You can get any of our previous podcasts on WTSpod.com, or you can go to any podcast provider. I personally use Podcast Republic, being Stitcher, and just search WTS Pod on any podcast provider. Danny is on Instagram and Twitter, very actively so, at Dan Joe Murray. I'm at Instagram and Twitter, very actively so, at Merrigan Mania. Both of us are thoroughly enjoying the WWE on A&E documentaries. The most recent one is Booker T, and it has been my favourite thus far. And we might talk about that next week on the intro. But until then, clear eyes,
full hearts,
hand low.
Good luck.